Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 295 of Pencils and Lipstick. I am Kat Caldwell, and today we are going to be talking about how to start a story. This comes from a comment I got in TikTok of someone literally saying, I have an idea for a story, how do I start? Which is pretty broad. So we're going to go through a couple different ways for you to start. This is not to say that you have to do all of these things in order to start. I just want to give you a few ideas. Because it really depends on where you are, how much writing you've done before, and it gets complicated to answer that question, not knowing who you are and your background. But I do want to say there are lots of people out there that sell you a certain way to start writing a story, and I just don't believe in that. I believe that there are many, many ways for you to start writing a story, and it really depends on you. So we're going to go through a couple different ideas for you, and I hope that this helps you guys out. Before we get into it, I want to make the announcement that I and Becky Grogan are going to start Becky's going to start coming in every month. So if you don't remember that episode, I highly recommend you go find it. It is a marketing episode with Becky Grogan. She's been in marketing for decades, she says. Probably decades go by so quickly. And now she has niched down to book marketing. And so she has a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts, and it's really hard to put into one episode. And she was going to come back on just to do another appearance. And then I asked her, well, why don't we just do it monthly? Because marketing is something that authors need to do all the time, and we need to be consistent in it. So I hope that you guys are excited for this news. I'm very excited for this news. I want to encourage you guys in your marketing. I want to help you in your marketing, and help myself, quite honestly, with her expertise. So we're going to go from like basics to intermediate to advanced, and we'll probably bounce back and forth between them, knowing that, in any given month, somebody listening is in that spot. But you'll also be able to go back and listen to the other episodes. And then an exciting little part of it is that we will start doing live episodes. We'll be recording them live. We'll be talking about a certain topic, but you'll be able to join us and either put your question in the chat or ask it in audio, and then that will be the episode. So that isn't yet. We're going to be brainstorming that. We'll be coming on with a couple topics first. But if you do have topics that you would like to talk about, definitely DM me on my Instagram or TikTok. If you're part of my newsletter, which you should be, you can just answer any email there and it will go straight to me. So all the links are in the show notes below. There will also be, and we'll keep telling you, she's going to come on very soon in the next few weeks, and we'll give even more details. She'll probably be on, oh my goodness, it's the end of January already. She'll probably be on next week or the next. So we definitely be looking out for that. And I hope that you're excited about it, because I'm excited. I know that we need help with our writing and our editing, but we also need help with our marketing, right? So let me know. Click on the links below and let's get into how to start a story. So this is a lot for, I realize that this sounds like it's for beginners, people who maybe don't know where to start. And some of you are really advanced in your writing. Like some of you are beyond me. You have more books out than I do. And so maybe starting is not an issue for you. And that's cool. Absolutely. So if you do listen to this and you have any like extra ideas or, even disagreements, I would love to hear from you. Or if you just have different ideas to help out beginner writers. But this can also be for anyone who maybe has written in one genre for a long time and just is like needs some oomph to start a new genre, maybe. So the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about when you are starting a a book, if you are beginner, if you've never really written before, but you've sort of hit your reading era, and the more you read, the more this story sort of forms in your head, and you want to join, the author talk or whatever it is. But if you've never really been a writer, I would suggest that you figure out storytelling first, that you look into storytelling. And I am going to recommend The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. That is a really easy book to read. I think it's even easier to listen to. There is an audiobook. He has a nice British accent. I think that goes into what story is and how it how our brains absorb it. And that might sound kind of dry if you're more of a fiction reader, but it is really important to understand what story is. There are, I'm sure, other YouTube videos about story, like what makes a story. It's a lot of people say it's a beginning, middle, and end. Okay, but you can write a lot of words with a beginning, middle, and end, and it not be a story that hits home. There are certain things that human brains look for when we're looking for story. Lisa Crone has a great course on it. I don't know where you can find it anymore because the place that hosted it shut down. But Lisa Crone, her books are a little bit more in depth to read. Her name is Cron. Story or Die is one of them. Story Genius is another. They're a little bit more in depth. They're a little more, they're going to take a little bit more focus, I would say. But it is important for you before you just start writing words, because if you're on social media and you see all these writers, saying, I hit 50,000 words, I hit 80,000 words, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are words that belong in the story, which is hard to sort of wrap your head around when you're starting out, because even I had a difficulty figuring that out. Even I, as though I'm, no, like all of us have difficulty figuring that out. And especially if we haven't spent some time understanding what story is. You can also look into The Trope Thesaurus by Jennifer Hilt. Those are really good, and they're a little less in depth, but she does go into just the main points of character building in order to add the tropes to the story. So you can look at those as well. And she has a great newsletter, Jennifer Hilt, Hilt. Of course, I will have the links in the show notes below. But what you're really going to want to do is look into the goal, motivation, and conflict of your story. Now, backing up a little bit before we get into that, you need the next thing that you can start if you really don't want to look into storytelling, which I think is a sort of a lifelong learning curve. Basically, like we should always be continuing our education on storytelling, reminding us what humans are looking for in storytelling. And again, like you could probably find quite a few videos through Readsy talking about it. They just might go more in depth than you want to, but I highly recommend that you look into that. Now, the second place that you can start is building your character. So if you have this character in mind, we'll get to plot in a second, but if you have a character that has come to your head more than the plot, what you should do is build that character. So a little of this has to do with the genre that you want to write. I assume if you have a story idea, it's the genre. And with the character, you're going to have to go into the goals, motivation, and conflict of that character. And this is going to be the easiest way to build this character out. I know that there are a lot of character quizzes out there that are, honestly, most of them are nonsense and not worth your time. They could be fun if you're stuck, I guess. It is important to know a little bit what your character looks like, where they're from. Sure. Like, what did they do in high school? I don't know. Like, Some of that is important. A lot of it is not. It's just not. But if you're going to have fun with it, go ahead. What is really important is the goal, motivation, and conflict of your character. And then we can get into their backstory. Okay, so when we talk about goal, motivation, and conflict, and that has gone into in depth in both the science of storytelling and the tropes thesaurus, the original. She has lots of genre ones now, but the original, the trope thesaurus, Monica Lionel talks about it in her Substack a lot. I talk about it on my email newsletter a lot. We're always talking about it because it's what carries the story through. And here's why. The story is about the character and how they're making decisions in order to get their goal. Whether the character is human or alien or animal, that doesn't really matter. The main character has a goal for this story. So when we're talking about their goal, like find your character's goal, we're only talking about the slice of life that this story is encompassing for that character. So on the first page of the book, when we open that character, it opens in media res. It's like in the middle of their life. It doesn't start from when they're little, usually, like unless it's a YA, but it's starting, like the doorbell rang. They're already alive. They've already lived a life. We don't know what age they are yet. Maybe you'll probably find out in that first paragraph or two. But there's all, media res is that we're starting like we're being dropped into that person's life. And we know that as humans, it's not a big deal to us. Weirdly enough, we'll just accept it. That's what's so cool about the science of storytelling. Is just like we just accept these things. So media res is that we're just dropped into this book. So when we open the book to page 1, that person's already alive. They've already lived a life, and they have a goal in mind. There's something happening for this book. This is where the author comes in of understanding where this person is in their life and what they're trying to achieve. Okay, we're not talking like, I don't know, like if they're 25 and their goal for their retirement. I mean, unless that really has to do with the story, I guess I can't think of a reason why it would be, but they have a goal. They're trying to get a certain job. They're trying to get a certain man. They're trying to get, deal with a certain colleague or a certain boss. They're trying to get a certain murderer. They're trying to, whatever. So they have these sort of goals in mind. And this is where you as the author need to understand what that goal for the book is going to be. So then the motivation is, why do they have that goal? And this is sometimes missing when I'm editing books. And this is what I sometimes spend a lot of time thinking about for my books is, why do they want that goal? Why? What is their motivation for it? And if you don't have that motivation answered, you can write a lot of words that go nowhere and don't really mean anything and don't really hit. Okay, you need that motivation. Why do they want to get into Harvard? They have to have a motivation. They've always wanted to work for this one law firm. They come from immigrant parents and they don't want to be like their immigrant parents. They want to be a lawyer or whatever and not struggle. Like there has to be a motivation to it. And it can be depending on your genre. So like if it's sweet, the motivation is going to usually be a little bit more surface. And if it's a little more gritty novel, they'll claim that to have a surface and they'll really have a deeper level. I'm thinking of that Adam Sandler movie where, help me out, y'all, where the mom is a cleaner and she's like being a maid for Adam Sandler and Tay Leone, I think. And then the girl is always trying to be better, right? And then the mom finally asks her, what's wrong with being somebody like me? And she was getting to the deeper point, right? And the whole movie started with her applying to Harvard. Why? What is her motivation? And so that movie is a little more complicated than what we're getting into now, but the truth is like the motivation, the whole question of the story was asking this girl, what is your motivation for getting into Harvard? Is it to be rich, or is it to be, I still want to be kind like my mother, I just, want to use my intellectual abilities to their maximum? There's a difference there, and they will make choices. That's the thing. Depending on their motivation, they will make the choices that they will in the story. And those choices are going to lead to conflict in the story. Okay, so your motivation is that important. Why do we want this? And here's the thing, as the story goes, I use Casablanca in one of my master classes, where his goal at the beginning is to be left alone because he's so hurt by Elsa just not showing up when they were supposed to escape together. And his whole motivation, you can see it in the first scene, is he doesn't stick his neck out for anyone. He's just going to survive the war. Nothing is worth fighting for. Don't worry about it. And then here comes Elsa again, of all the joints and all the worlds she had to, walk into mine. And his motivation in the first half of the story is like to basically show her that this is not worth it, right? And then his goal changes, and he realizes that he doesn't want to be that person anymore. And that's the whole character arc right there. So if you're asking me, silently in your head or out loud, can their goals change? Yes. But I highly doubt that whole character arc didn't take any thought process. That took a lot of thought process for those writers to figure out how they were going to write that character. So that character, they wanted to have it be a hero at the end. How could he not be a hero in the beginning? Okay, so you need to have the goals, the motivation, and the conflict. The motivation is going to create the conflict, because the motivation, like if I want to get into Harvard no matter what, I'm willing to step all over people. And if if my best friend suddenly becomes closer to valedictorian, she's trying really hard, let's say, and has always been behind me, or let's call her Laura, has always been slightly behind Laura, and Laura loves her best friend, but really she thinks that she is better. And then all of a sudden her best friend gets better grades and gets better awards, and it looks like she might become valedictorian. Or maybe they've switched up how they choose the valedictorian. Maybe Laura's willing to do whatever it takes to become the valedictorian, to get into Harvard, even if it means hurting her friend. And then the whole story can be about, well, she gets to the point where she hurts her friend. She gets she realizes that she's probably going to be chosen for valedictorian. And then she has to face the question, is it worth it? Okay, so this is going to take this is your thought process here. Okay. Now, even if you are somebody, like, let's go into the third, like when you're starting a story, I'm never going to tell you to not start writing before you figure this stuff out. It is totally possible for you to write while doing this. I like writing. I'm willing to throw away the words. That's the caveat there. If you have a character in mind and you already have scenes in mind, I would go ahead and start there. That's number 3. Just start what's in your head. Just understand, I want to be kind to you and warn you that you will still have to figure this out. The goals, motivation, and conflict. But sometimes it takes writing to figure that out. Okay, so be okay with tossing the words. So if you have a scene in mind for this story, go ahead and write it out, and then say, basically you would say, what would happen next? Okay. And you think about the scene that you have and what decision that character has made, and think about what would logically come next. Okay. Now, you still, again, have to figure out the goal, motivation, and conflict. So writing right away can cause you to do a lot more rewrites and can lead to having to toss words. I'm okay with that because that's just sort of how I figure out my characters. So I just want you to be okay with that. I want you to be warned. So if you have a story in mind and you have one scene in mind, go ahead and write it. Write it out, see how it feels, see how it flows. Do know that every scene has in itself a beginning, middle, and end, right? There has to be a reason for that scene. I do have a masterclass about scenes. And it goes into like what every scene should have. And it's just 6 simple steps of what should be in a scene. But definitely go ahead. Just remember, you might you might toss some of these scenes, and some of them might be fun that you can, sort of add into other books, or it's just that as the motivation and the conflict unfold in your head, you'll have to go back and see if that scene is worth it. But I have written out many scenes that started the story that didn't actually end up in the book, which is interesting. So it just sort of helped me solidify the character. And then it didn't actually end up in there, that's just strange how our brains work. So go ahead and write the scene and just ask, what would come next, and check out some teaching on scenes, livewritethrive.com. I will put that in the show notes below, and my masterclass on scenes. And I will say, you can find books on this as well, and Readsy as well. They have a great YouTube channel. You can find a lot of information that way. Okay, so what if you have a plot in mind first? If you have a plot in mind, you probably think in a certain way that would go with plotting out the novel. And you might have a little more difficulty in developing the characters. So if you have a plot in mind, I would go ahead and try to plot out a timeline of what you see in your head for what will happen. And understanding that every story, leads up to the biggest conflict, right? There are turning points and plot twists leading up to that. There's usually a plot twist turning point after the conflict, and then the diminishment that leads to the end. If you want to type out the timeline, and that might help you visually figure out what's going to happen, and then what character do you need to add to that story. Understanding that if you're a lot more plot oriented, you're going to have to think of a character that really has to be there in that plot. So remember that the character of the story, the main character, it can't just be anyone. It has to be somebody that shows the reader it couldn't be anyone else. And so you have to figure out that, like, why couldn't it be anyone else? Why couldn't it just be the neighbor? Why is it got to be this kid? All right. Or this, whoever. There has to be a reason for it. So if you watch any of your sci-fi, fantasy, romance, whatever, there is a reason why the character is chosen. So if you have your plot, write out your plot points. Plotter.com is a great one to use to sort of write that out. I'm going to put that in the show notes below. It's a nice visual of it, and then trying to figure out your character. And so what you would do then afterwards is go choose a character that most likely is in your head already, and then you're still going to have to go and find their goal, motivation, and how it fits into your plot. So you can start with plot, you can start with character, you can start with a scene. It really just doesn't matter where you start. It all depends on what truly invigorates you to keep writing the story. I want to also give you the option to write, if you don't have a scene in mind, but you have a character in mind, most likely you have the character visualized as they should be at the end, in their most hero state. That's what I like to call it, their hero embodied state. So write the ending and how they are at that point, at the ending. And why do I say that? Because then you can then you can figure out who they should be at the beginning. So remember how I said in Casablanca, if they were writing this story and maybe they started out with, we want him to be this hero guy that sacrifices love, like his second chance at love, because World War II and is so much more important. And getting this guy out who's the face of the liberation is much more important. He becomes this hero. Okay, so who does he need to be in order to actually become a hero? Well, he needs to be an anti-hero. So you can either make him a villain, which is difficult to get sympathy for from the reader, right? And it can happen, but you have to have a lot of goal, motivation, and conflict. You're going to have to figure out at what point they're going to become likable to the reader. Or you can sort of have him be the anti-hero that's just like nonchalant and apathetic. And that's what they chose, right? So he's just apathetic, which leads to selfishness. He's just looking out for himself. So how do you then, the plot twists, how do you get him to change his mind? So if you're starting out, you don't really have a scene in mind, but you do have like a certain character or character idea, write out the ending. This can even work for plot. If you have, most likely you have the ending in mind, like one of the heroes is going to fly his plane up into the spaceship and blow it up, and sacrificing himself for all of Earth. Of course, I'm thinking of Independence Day because it's now on Netflix, and my kids were like, "What's this?" So interestingly, that's a side character, right? It's not the main character. There's reasons for that. So write out the ending. You might write that first. Maybe they wrote it first as the Will Smith character doing it, and then they realized that's not going to work because everyone will be so sad that Will Smith killed himself. And it actually works better that the alcoholic dad does it, right, for his kids. So write out your ending, and then make some time thinking about who that character is, who you've stuck in there, and then who they need to be at the beginning. Okay. And then decide if that ending, who's the hero in that ending, the main character or a side character. So I think that will help you get started. Write several different versions of the ending. That is an idea that a lot of people suggest. You can also write the beginning if you think you know the beginning. I would say a lot of people say this, to write the beginning. The beginning will probably change. I don't think I'm looking at my books now. I don't think I've written a book that from the very beginning that chapter never changed. Yeah, I think only in Audience with the King, the first chapter just stayed the same. No, Stepping Across the Desert, that one also stayed. Okay, so the majority of my books, whatever beginning I started with, changed by the time I was done editing it. Okay, so you can write the beginning. Maybe you have the beginning in mind. Just understand, here's the biggest issue I see with that is more likely than not, you see that character in their already embodied hero state. So you're going to have to ask yourself hard questions about how this hero is coming off, because if they're already quote unquote perfect, if they've already quote unquote learned their lesson and they already are the hero, then what's the story? Because the story is about them making choices, hard choices, to reach the end goal. And in the time of making those choices, they are maturing and changing as a human. Okay. And this is where the science of storytelling really gets into. Like, he gives lots of examples, which is why I like it so much, of how the character is changing. And I don't think that we realize this as readers and viewers until we're actually studying story. Okay. So again, I would go back to the science of storytelling and pick that book up. But just know that if you're starting with the beginning, really be hard on yourself to question how you're portraying that character, because more likely than not, you're portraying them already as a hero. And that's why a lot of people disclaim and say, do not make your hero too perfect. And what they're not saying, don't make him too perfect in the like physical or personality sense. That's not the thing. They need to be the opposite of the hero they'll be at the end, at the beginning. Well, maybe not even the opposite. They just need to be a notch away, at least. They have to learn some sort of lesson. They have to mature somehow. They have to understand the world a little bit better. They have to tweak their worldview by the end of it. That's just what story is. It's walking with the main character and seeing what they would do and living that experience without us having to do it. So, if you are walking with the main character who's always in the cave because they're so afraid of going outside because all of the mountain lions will eat them, and then they discover fire, do they take the chance and go see that, figure out fire, or do they stay where they are? We are like, what would I do? We get to answer that question without leaving our house, which is wonderful. So that is why we're coming to story. So just be careful with that when you're starting with the beginning. The last thing that I would say, if you have a story in your head, and you're not really sure where to start, you can pick up a lot of different courses. If you are somebody who likes to have groups to sort of motivate you, there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of coaches. I do one-on-one coaching. There's a lot of group coaching. I would just say, if that works for you, take the time to find that group. Okay. Take the time, because that's money, that's time. Really be purposeful in choosing, what group or coach to go with. And understand that, just starting to write is amazing in itself, and that you will probably have to edit a lot. So it's okay to just start anywhere. Really, just start anywhere. Start with any of this. Take a couple of these 6 and dabble in all 6 of them. Try to write out the plots. Try to write out the character, goal, motivation, and conflict. That might change from the beginning. If you're very, very, very new, that might even change because you might start with one thing, and as you write out the plot, realize that you need something else. Dabble in listening to an audiobook on storytelling and the basics of it, or read it while, trying to write the ending. Write a couple different endings, try to go back to the plot, try to write that out a little bit, try to spend some time thinking about how all of these things are going to fit together, because it really is a lot more than just writing so many words a day, which is the easy thing for us writers to put on social media, right? It is a layering of all these different things, the character, the side character. The main side characters need their own goals, motivation, and conflict. They need to understand, because they're going to come up against the main character, right? Try to write the ending, try to write the conflict, try to write the beginning. You don't have to necessarily go linear, write linearly either. So the 7th point is just to start anywhere and start mixing them up. Because in the end, all of these layers are going to have to be put in there. So it doesn't really matter if you are starting with one and then going to the next, or if you're somebody who just needs to take a little bit from every place. There really is no perfect way to start writing a story. It's just going to come. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes encouragement from others. We are here to encourage you. I think it's great that you're starting a new story. That you're starting to write, and just try, and don't put pressure on yourself to have it done within a certain, time frame other than years. Like maybe give yourself a year, but don't, try to say, I'm going to have this done in 6 weeks. If you're very new, that probably won't happen. And if it does, it will probably need a lot of editing, unless you really understand storytelling. But don't put the pressure on yourself if you can't, keep up with it. It's really more important to me that you understand the storytelling aspect and you produce a product that you're proud of and that readers gobble up than to do it fast, if you understand me. Okay. So I hope that these points helped you, especially 1 through 6. Those were the main points. And then the 7th point is just to start anywhere and mix them up if you need to. Just, maybe start with one. If it doesn't work for you, start with a different one. This is also a learning process on who you are as a writer as well. So definitely check us out next week. Pencils and Lipstick. We'll have more announcements about the marketing episodes on TikTok and in my stories on Instagram. Check out the show notes below. There's going to be a lot of links down there. And as always, you can always message me on Instagram or TikTok or reply to any email that I have sent you. But otherwise, good luck in starting your story, and I will see you next week.